The Galactic Council chamber gleamed with its usual grandeur, an enormous hall filled with the most powerful beings in the universe. Representatives of 100 civilizations sat in their respective places, their alien forms ranging from gaseous entities to beings of pure energy. At the center, the Supreme Arbiter, a towering figure of pulsating light, addressed the assembly with an amused hum. "The request before us is most curious," the Arbiter said, his radiant glow flickering slightly. "The species known as humans seek a seat among us." A ripple of laughter spread through the hall. The very idea was ridiculous. Humans, those fragile, short-lived, emotionally driven creatures from an insignificant corner of the galaxy, dared to stand before them as equals? A towering insectoid ambassador clicked its mandibles in amusement. They lack the lifespan, intelligence, or refinement necessary for such a role. "They are primitive," chimed a crystalline being. "They still rely on fusion reactors and crude spacefaring vessels. They war among themselves more than any species we've ever seen," a deep-voiced amphibious delegate added. "If anything, their presence here is a threat to our order." The Supreme Arbiter's glow intensified slightly. "Then it is decided. The request is denied." At the far end of the chamber, a lone human representative sat in silence, his face unreadable. He had expected this. Humanity had always been dismissed, underestimated, looked down upon. But that was the thing about humans. They never stopped pushing forward. Slowly, he stood, adjusting his uniform with practiced ease. His expression remained neutral, but his voice carried a quiet intensity. "I understand. You see us as weak, as insignificant." The hall was quiet now, but the lingering sense of amusement had not faded. He continued, "You mistake patience for weakness. You assume that because we have not flexed our strength, we have none." The Arbiter pulsed with curiosity. "Do you believe your kind possesses anything that would warrant our concern?" A small smile played on the human's lips. "I do." He pressed a small device on his wrist, and in an instant, the central holographic display flickered to life, replacing the Council's insignia with a live transmission. At first, it showed nothing but empty space. Then hundreds, no thousands, of massive ships emerged from the void, their dark metallic hulls gleaming under distant starlight. Their designs were unlike anything the Council had seen before, sleek, efficient, and bristling with weapons far beyond what they believed humans capable of constructing. A collective gasp filled the chamber. The amusement had vanished. The human representative's voice remained calm. "You assumed we were weak because we hid our strength. You thought us incapable because we did not challenge you. That was a mistake." An insectoid ambassador lurched forward. "Impossible. Humanity does not have the resources for such an armada." "We didn't need them," the human replied smoothly. "We come from a world where survival is a battle, where war has shaped our history for millennia. While you sat in your ivory towers, convinced of your superiority, we prepared." The Supreme Arbiter pulsed erratically now, an almost imperceptible flicker of hesitation. The human took a step forward, his eyes locking onto the ancient being. "You should have let us in when we asked nicely." The holographic display shifted, showing the human fleet repositioning itself, moving with coordinated precision, straight toward key Council territories. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council knew fear. "Now," the human said, his voice cold and measured. "Let's talk about our seat." The silence in the Galactic Council chamber was absolute. The once mocking aliens, who had laughed at humanity mere moments ago, now sat frozen, staring at the massive human fleet displayed before them. The Supreme Arbiter's glow flickered erratically, as if processing the impossible. This cannot be. The human representative, still standing tall, calm, simply folded his arms. Oh, but it is, a reptilian delegate hissed in disbelief. You expect us to believe that a species so young, so backward, has built an armada capable of rivaling our own? The human tapped his wrist device again, and the holographic feed shifted, zooming in on one of the human warships. The sheer scale of it dwarfed even the largest vessels of the Council's own navy. Then, with a subtle command, the human triggered another display. Technical readouts, energy signatures, and weapon schematics, all revealing something terrifying. The weapons humanity had developed were not just equal to the Council's, they were superior. A being of flowing silver gas, a species known for its cold logic, finally spoke. This is a bluff. You could not have built this in secrecy. The human chuckled, shaking his head. You think too highly of yourselves. You never saw us as a threat, so you never bothered watching. And we watched everything. The crystalline delegate's glow dimmed. This is dangerous, an imbalance of power. Why would you hide such military strength? The human took a step forward, his voice quieter now, but no less threatening. Because we knew this day would come. The Arbiter's pulsing form flared. Explain. The human looked around the chamber, scanning the faces of the once confident rulers of the galaxy. We humans have a saying, power corrupts. And absolute power? He tilted his head. Well, look at yourselves. The hall remained silent. You never wanted allies, the human continued. You wanted subjects, every species here. You absorbed them, dictated their growth, controlled their expansion. Those who resisted? Gone. Either persuaded or erased from history. The Supreme Arbiter's radiance darkened. We maintain order. No, the human countered. You maintain control. The hologram changed again. This time it wasn't humanity's fleet on display. It was a different set of images. Battlefields from ages past. Ruined planets. Species that had once challenged the Council's authority, only to be wiped out. The reptilian delegate hissed again. Those were necessary actions. The human cut him off. Necessary? To whom? The dead? His eyes narrowed. You decided who was worthy of survival, who was civilized enough to join your council. He shook his head. We saw the pattern, and we knew that one day you'd look at us and make the same decision. A new image appeared on the display. The Sol system. A series of council warships, patrol vessels, scientific observers, strategically placed around the edges of human space. They hadn't come to welcome humanity. They had come to monitor, to assess, to plan. The Supreme Arbiter's glow became unstable. You misunderstand our— No, the human interrupted sharply. We understand perfectly. He let the words sink in before adding, That's why we built the fleet. Another pause. Another long, heavy silence. The insectoid ambassador, who had mocked humanity just minutes ago, finally broke. What do you want? The human smiled. Cold, sharp, victorious. I already told you. He gestured toward the Supreme Arbiter's podium. Our seat. The Arbiter pulsed furiously. You cannot threaten your way into the Council. The human tilted his head. Threaten? He chuckled softly. This isn't a threat. This is reality. You have two choices. He held up a single finger. 1. You give us our seat and we work together. Maybe, just maybe. We help you fix what you've broken. Then, a second finger. 2. You refuse. And we see what happens when a species like humanity is backed into a corner. A deep, unshakable tension filled the chamber. For the first time in its long, long history, The Galactic Council had encountered a species they could not control, and they knew it. The Supreme Arbiter's glow flickered violently, shifting between brilliance and shadow. The chamber, once filled with laughter and derision, now felt like a tomb, silent, suffocating. The most powerful beings in the galaxy sat frozen, their ancient minds struggling to comprehend the impossible. The human representative remained standing, his expression calm but unyielding. He had delivered his message. Now he was waiting for them to accept the truth. The crystalline delegate's glow remained dim. "You ask us to surrender?" The human tilted his head. "Surrender?" He let out a soft chuckle. "Number, we are not conquerors. We don't need to take your council by force." His eyes sharpened. "We've already won." Another murmur swept through the chamber, but this time it wasn't amusement. It was uncertainty. Fear. A hunched, shadowy being, one of the oldest in the room, finally rasped, "You expect us to believe that your species, barely past its infancy, stands on equal footing with us?" The human didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tapped his wrist device once more. The hologram changed. It no longer displayed the massive human fleet. It no longer showed the Council's past atrocities or their hidden warships lingering on the edges of Sul. Now, it showed something far worse. A list. A long, detailed, undeniable list. It contained the names of every major civilization in the Council, their homeworlds, their fleets, their logistical centers, their trade routes, their vulnerabilities. The human let the silence drag out before speaking again, his voice soft, almost casual. "For centuries you've ruled this galaxy under the belief that no one could ever challenge you." He gestured towards the list. "And yet, here we are, knowing everything." The Supreme Arbiter flared with unstable energy. "How?" The human's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Because you never thought we mattered. You never hid anything from us because, in your minds, we weren't worth hiding it from." He took a step forward. "That was your first mistake." The amphibious delegate, the one who had dismissed humanity as warlike and chaotic, now seemed to shrink into his seat. "And your second mistake?" The human's voice turned cold. "You gave us time." The room seemed to darken. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the oldest. We don't have the most advanced technology." The human let his words settle before adding, "But we are the most dangerous." The Arbiter's pulsing light became frantic. "Because you are willing to fight." The human exhaled through his nose, almost amused. "Number, because we refuse to lose." Another tap on his wrist. The hologram zoomed out, revealing the entire galactic map. Humanity's fleet, despite its size, was small compared to the vast forces of the Council. On paper, humanity should have had no chance. But the map didn't show just ships. It showed something else. It showed chaos. Scattered among the Council's worlds were flickering red indicators, uprisings, unrest, sabotage, supply chains mysteriously failing, communications disrupted, military movements compromised. And then, the final blow. A single chilling sentence appeared in bold text beneath the map. "They are not just humans." The Supreme Arbiter's glow dimmed as realization dawned. "You," the human nodded. "We've been talking." The Council had ruled the galaxy for untold millennia. They had crushed rebellions before they could even begin. They had snuffed out potential threats before they could grow. But they had never faced an opponent like humanity, a species that didn't just fight on battlefields, but in shadows, in minds, in whispers, a species that had spent decades, centuries, slowly, methodically, sowing the seeds of resistance across the Council's vast dominion. Because while the Council had been watching humanity, humanity had been watching everyone, and they had been listening. The human let the weight of that realization sink in. Then, he spoke one last time. You never had control. You only had the illusion of it. His eyes swept across the room. So, I'll ask again. He gestured toward the Supreme Arbiter's towering throne. Our seat. For the first time in history, the Galactic Council did not have a choice. The Supreme Arbiter's glow pulsed erratically, flickering like a dying star. The vast chamber of the Galactic Council, once filled with arrogance and certainty, now trembled under an unspoken truth. Humanity had already won. A species they had dismissed as primitive, unrefined, unworthy of their attention, had outmaneuvered them all. The map of the galaxy still floated in the air, the glowing red indicators marking the fractures in the Council's once unshakable grip. The rebellions, the sabotaged supply chains, the infiltrations, it was all there. Not a bluff, not a threat, a reality that could no longer be ignored. The Supreme Arbiter finally spoke, his voice a trembling echo of what it once was. You manipulated our empire from within? The human representative let out a slow breath, as if disappointed they had only just figured it out. We didn't start the fire, he said smoothly. We just fanned the flames. A sharp, chittering noise broke the silence, one of the insectoid ambassadors slamming its clawed limbs against the table. This is treason, subversion. The Council does not negotiate with... The human turned to face him, his expression unchanging. The Council, he said, voice firm, no longer gets to decide. The insectoid faltered, its mandibles twitching. The Supreme Arbiter's glow flickered once more. You expect us to yield, just like that? The human smiled, calm, measured, victorious. Number I expect you to think. He gestured towards the map. Your empire is already rotting from within. The people you rule, they've been waiting for a spark. We simply gave them one. He tilted his head. We didn't conquer you, Arbiter. Your own arrogance did. The silence in the room felt suffocating. The weight of the moment pressed down on every alien in attendance. The crystalline delegate's glow was still dim. You could have used this information to destroy us. You could have waged war instead of playing politics. The human exhaled sharply, almost like a laugh. We could have. But unlike you, we don't believe in exterminating those who might challenge us. He let the words hang in the air. We believe in something else. The Supreme Arbiter's voice was hollow now, barely above a whisper. And what is that? The human looked around the chamber, letting his gaze linger on each delegate, their expressions ranging from shock to anger, to quiet, growing fear. Then he spoke, his voice calm, certain, undeniable. Survival. A long pause, then slowly, methodically, he walked forward. His boots echoed against the polished floor as he ascended the grand steps leading to the center of the chamber. No one stopped him. The Supreme Arbiter remained still, his once brilliant glow now dimmed to something lesser. Lesser, because for the first time in the Council's history, he was no longer the most powerful being in the room. The human stepped beside him. Then, without hesitation, he turned and lowered himself into the empty chair meant for a council member. His fingers drummed against the armrest. He leaned back, relaxed, as if he had always belonged there. Then he looked up, locking eyes with the Supreme Arbiter. You may begin the session, he said. The Arbiter hesitated. Then, with a slow, reluctant pulse of light, he nodded. The Galactic Council had a new member, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Supreme Arbiter's glow had never been dimmer. The chamber of the Galactic Council, once a place of absolute authority where decisions shaped the fate of entire species, now felt like a cage. A trap they had walked into without ever realizing it. The human representative sat in his newly claimed seat, fingers tapping lazily against the armrest. His expression was unreadable, but the message was clear. Humanity had forced its way into the Council, not with brute force, not with an open war, but with something far worse: control. The Supreme Arbiter turned, slowly facing the rest of the assembled Council. "The session will now begin," he said, though the words carried no real power anymore. A hush fell over the delegates. The insectoid ambassador, still visibly shaken, clacked its mandibles. This cannot be allowed to stand. We must reassert our position. Humanity has—" The human cut him off with a simple raise of his hand. The gesture was small, but it carried more weight than any command the Supreme Arbiter had ever given. The insectoid fell silent. The Supreme Arbiter watched this unfold with growing horror. Power. True power wasn't about weapons, fleets, or threats. It was about authority, and in a single move, the human had claimed it. The reptilian delegate, clearly uncomfortable, rasped, "You said you did not come to conquer." The human nodded. "I did." The reptilian's slitted eyes narrowed. "Then tell me, what is your goal?" The human leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "Change." The crystalline delegate's glow pulsed with unease. "Change?" The human tilted his head. "This council has ruled for millennia. You decide who thrives and who suffers. You shape the future, deciding which species rise and which are crushed under your boot." His voice was calm, but the edge beneath it was unmistakable. "That ends today." The Supreme Arbiter's light darkened further. "You think yourself our equal?" The human smiled. "No," he said simply. "I think we're better." The words sent another ripple through the chamber. The Supreme Arbiter pulsed in frustration. "And if we refuse your change?" The human exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. "You still don't understand, do you?" He gestured toward the map, hovering in the center of the chamber. The countless red markers, the signs of unrest, rebellion, and chaos that humanity had cultivated over the years, remained as a silent reminder of what had already happened. "This isn't a negotiation," the human said. "This isn't a choice." He leaned back in his chair, utterly relaxed. "You will change. Because if you don't, the galaxy will do it for you." The reptilian delegate hissed under his breath. The amphibious one seemed frozen, his bulbous eyes darting between the human and the Supreme Arbiter. The crystalline delegate's glow flickered uncertainly. They had spent their entire existence believing in their own superiority, believing that they were the architects of the universe, the ones who shaped fate. And now, in the span of a single meeting, they had been reduced to mere spectators. The Supreme Arbiter's glow flickered. "And what do you propose?" The human's smile grew wider. "That's the spirit," he murmured. Then his eyes hardened. "First, we redefine the Council's purpose. No more dictating which civilizations get to thrive. No more crushing those who don't fall in line with your vision." He gestured toward the reptilian. "Your species? Your people aren't happy. You know it. The cracks are forming." The reptilian didn't speak. He didn't need to. The human was right. The human's gaze swept across the other delegates. "Same goes for the rest of you. Your own people are starting to see the truth. You hold them back as much as you claim to protect them." The Supreme Arbiter remained still. "And if we agree?" The human shrugged. "Then we move forward. Together." He let the word hang in the air for a moment before adding, "But if you don't?" The hologram changed again. The red indicators on the map flared, growing larger, the instability spreading like wildfire. The human tapped the armrest. Then we watched the galaxy burn. The Supreme Arbiter stared at the display, at the looming chaos that threatened to consume everything they had built. The Council had always believed themselves untouchable, the great guiding force of the galaxy, the rulers of civilization itself. But now, they were cornered. And worse, they knew it. Slowly, painfully, the Supreme Arbiter turned back toward the human, and bowed his head. A single, silent acknowledgement. The human's smile didn't fade. "Good choice," he said. And with that, humanity had done the impossible. They hadn't just won a seat on the Council. They had taken the galaxy. The Supreme Arbiter's glow remained dim, flickering weakly, as if the very essence of his authority had been drained away. The Galactic Council Chamber, once the epicenter of power in the universe, now felt like a relic, an old monument to an era that had just ended. And the cause of its collapse sat calmly in his chair, fingers drumming idly on the armrest. The human. The one they had mocked, the one they had dismissed, the one they had denied. And now, the one they all feared. The other council members shifted uneasily in their seats, the weight of reality pressing down on them like a crushing void. The insectoid delegate, who had once spoken with arrogance and condescension, now remained silent, mandibles twitching in nervous uncertainty. The crystalline representative, who had ridiculed human technology, now radiated only unease. The reptilian delegate, who had scoffed at the idea of humanity ever being a threat, now sat perfectly still, eyes locked onto the map of unrest still glowing in the air. Finally, the Supreme Arbiter spoke. His voice, once filled with unquestioned authority, now carried the careful tone of someone who had realized just how fragile their power truly was. The Council will adapt. The words came slowly, as if they physically pained him. The old ways will be reconsidered. The human smiled, leaning forward slightly. Good. Another moment of silence passed before the amphibious delegate finally croaked, "And what do you intend to do now?" The human tilted his head slightly, as if he hadn't considered the question. Then, with a small, easy shrug, he replied, "Oh, nothing drastic. We'll help fix what's broken, restructure a few things, give your people the freedom they've been denied for so long." He let his words settle. That is, unless you'd rather the alternative. His fingers tapped the armrest again, and the holographic display briefly flickered, just enough to remind them of the chaos waiting on the fringes of their empire. The Supreme Arbiter dimmed further. No. The single word held the weight of surrender. A slow, satisfied nod was the only response the human gave. He had already won. No need to gloat. The insectoid delegate finally spoke, voice tight with poorly concealed bitterness. "And what of your fleet? You expect us to simply allow such an overwhelming force to remain unchecked?" The human's expression didn't change. "You misunderstand. The fleet isn't here to conquer you. It's here to keep you honest." The meaning was clear. Humanity had ensured that the Council could never again rule unchecked. Their decisions, their policies, their actions, everything would now be made under the ever-watchful gaze of the one species they had underestimated. The Supreme Arbiter hesitated, then spoke again, carefully measuring his words. "We acknowledge humanity's position." His light dimmed even further, the last remnants of resistance fading. "And we will work together." The human nodded once, as if this was the most natural outcome in the world. A wise decision. He rose slowly, smoothing out the sleeves of his uniform. "Then we have nothing more to discuss today." With a final glance around the chamber, he turned and walked away, his steps echoing through the stunned silence. As the council members watched him leave, one terrible realization settled in their minds. They had not just given humanity a seat at the table, they had just become part of his game. And no one, not even the Supreme Arbiter himself, knew just how far humanity planned to go. But one thing was certain: the age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of humanity had begun. The human representative walked with measured steps through the grand halls of the Galactic Council chamber, his posture calm, assured. Every step echoed with finality, a quiet reminder that the galaxy had shifted under humanity's grasp. The corridors, once lined with holographic banners celebrating the Council's dominion, now felt cold, obsolete. The guards stationed at the exits, members of various species who had once looked at humans with thinly veiled condescension, stood still, their eyes wary, their hands twitching near their weapons. Not that it mattered. The war had already been won. And it had never been fought with ships or soldiers. It had been fought in silence, in the minds of the arrogant, in the shadows of an empire too bloated to recognize its own weaknesses. The human representative knew this. He had counted on it. As he reached the exit, a voice called from behind him. "Wait!" The Supreme Arbiter. The human turned slowly, his expression unreadable. The Arbiter stood at the threshold of the chamber, his glow weak, flickering. It was the first time in recorded history that his radiance had faltered. "I need to understand," the Arbiter said. The human tilted his head slightly, saying nothing, waiting. The Supreme Arbiter took a slow step forward. "You could have destroyed us. You had every advantage. Your people—" His light pulsed erratically. "They would have followed you into war." A pause. Then, finally, the human spoke. "They would have." The Arbiter's glow flickered again. "Then why didn't you?" For the first time in the conversation, the human's expression shifted. A small, tired smile ghosted across his lips. "Because we've been at war long enough," he said simply. The Arbiter remained silent. The human let out a slow breath. "You ruled through power, through fear, through control." He gestured vaguely towards the chamber. "We don't want that. We don't need to be your conquerors." His eyes darkened. "We just needed to make sure you never were again." The Supreme Arbiter watched him for a long time, the weight of the moment pressing down on his form like a dying star. Finally, he spoke. "And now?" The human turned toward the exit. "Now?" He gave a quiet chuckle. "Now we go home. And watch." With that, he walked away, disappearing into the vastness of the Council's capital. Behind him, the Supreme Arbiter remained standing, his glow flickering in the empty silence. And for the first time in all of galactic history, the Council no longer ruled the stars. They were merely part of them. And humanity had become something far greater. The ones who watched, the ones who waited, the ones who would never let the galaxy fall into tyranny again. They were just humans, the Council had once said. Now, the galaxy knew better.